Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This week we're going to be going over cognitivism, and cognitivism is a particular view of emotions that holds that emotions are something along the lines of beliefs or are highly related to beliefs or judgments to one degree or another. In this lecture, though, we're going to focus on Martha Nussbaum's articulation of the view found in her book, The Upheavals of Thought. We're only going to focus on the first chapter. It's long enough, but she does develop it more over the course of her book. So if this is interesting to you, I would suggest looking through her book for a much more nuanced and interesting discussion of what we're talking about today. Martha Nussbaum is a fabulous philosopher. She works in lots of areas in philosophy and in economics and other areas related to that. And she's a philosopher at the University of Chicago. She's still working now. It's contemporary. She's still working, and if you ever have a chance to study with her, I would highly recommend it. All right. So her general view is that emotions are evaluative judgments that ascribe to certain things and persons outside of your own control great importance for the person's own flourishing. So emotions are an acknowledgement of neediness and a lack of self-sufficiency. So an emotion, there's a couple of things that are important here to notice. Your emotions are evaluative judgments that ascribe to certain things great importance for the person's own flourishing. So that's going to involve the person, right? A notion of his or her own self-flourishing, an attachment to something or someone, and a recognition that that person or that thing is important to his or her own flourishing, as well as an evaluative judgment about that thing in particular or about something related to the person or thing that the agent finds to be important. It's also important to understand some of the terms she uses. So she uses the word intentionality in this chapter a lot. And intentionality is was made popular by a guy named Franz Brentano, and it was used lots of other places as well. But intentionality is that property of beliefs and mental states that are about something else besides themselves. So, for example, like I can believe that there's a computer on my lap right now. In fact, there is a computer on my lap. So the intentional object is a computer. My belief is intentional. It's about something else. It's about the computer. So intentionality is people call it sometimes ofness or aboutness, and it's when something is about something else. Nussbaum holds that beliefs are about things, or sorry, emotions rather are about things. So, for example, I might be angry, but I'm not just angry in general. If it's an emotion, that would be what she would call a mood. If I'm angry, then I'm angry about something, or I'm angry at someone. If I'm afraid because of something. If I'm grieving about someone, right? So emotions are intentional. And this is one of the things that's really going to separate her from the views of someone like William James or Tony Damasio, where these feelings aren't really about, the emotions rather, aren't really about something else. Damasio has a rough picture of that where he claims that the emotion is a representation, or the feeling of the emotion rather is a representation of a particular set of neurological states. But that's more of a knowledge of the emotion as opposed to the emotion itself. So even on Damasio's view, which gets closer to a cognitivism that's not, still emotions lack intentionality, or at least a clear way to make them intentional. Emotions differ because of what they're about, right? So you have fear and hope and grief are not different always in their object. Sometimes they're about the same things, but they're rather seen in different ways or evaluated in different ways. So, fear, one might see himself or something he loves as seriously threatened. Hope, one might see oneself or what one loves as something uncertain but with a good chance of a good outcome. Grief, one sees an important object or a person as lost. So these are kind of the ideas, right? So if I'm grieved, I'm judging that something that is very important to me has been permanently removed from my life, or something like that. So all these emotions. So Nussbaum's example throughout the book is her mother and her mother's death. And so Nussbaum can have fear, be afraid of her mother, right? So maybe her mother's yelling at her, right? And then she can be angry at her mother, right? She can be happy with her mother or aggrieved about her mother. So the object's the same, but the way it's evaluated is different, or the content rather of the object, of the judgment about the object is different. And it has to do with the way the object is seen, is what how she's putting it. Oops. Um, so then emotions then for her view are, it's not just that they happen to be intentional, emotions are essentially intentional. So for Nussbaum then, James's view that the emotion is that body is an awareness of the bodily state, right? Um, or Damasio's view that the emotion is this set of neurological responses. It's not clear that those are intentional, right? They're not about things outside themselves. For Nussbaum, then, these can't even be emotions, but beliefs and emotions are beliefs for Nussbaum, and they're a kind of belief that invests their objects with certain sort of value or importance. Another interesting and key part of Nussbaum's view is that emotions make reference to one's own flourishing. So, if I am having an emotion, then I make an evaluative judgment about something insofar as it's related to my own flourishing as a human. So, I will think, perhaps like the example of grief is this one of is a really clear example, maybe because she uses it so much, but if something's really important to me, right? If it's very important to me, like it's a key in my life, right? So, so for Nussbaum, it seemed like her mom was there, a support to her. Her mom was there to talk to when things were difficult. Her mom was there to confide in. Her mom was there to love her. And so Nussbaum had this attachment to her mother, right? That was really important to her. So she saw her mom as a vital part of her own life, right? And it was a vital part of Nussbaum's own self-concept and flourishing. And so when you remove that from her life, that her mom from her life, you've removed something that's related to flourishing, Nussbaum's own flourishing. And so Nussbaum thinks that if something's not connected to, not cognitively connected to your own flourishing, then you won't have certain sort of emotions about it. She goes on to say that if a person has managed to invest an event with a certain importance in her own scheme and ends and goals, then she can have an emotion regarding these events, uh, regarding the distance. So it's important to understand here that uh, she uses the phrase schemes and goals, schemes of ends and goals, and there Nussbaum is talking about how it's related to your own life. So if something is important for my own scheme of ends. So that's like not a scheme like you're scheming, but a scheme of ends like your concept of things that are goals in your life, things that are important to you, projects that you have, things that are valuable that you want to build into your life. Um, those are schemes of ends. So what is your goal, right? That's an end and goals, so schemes of ends and goals. So what is a set of missions and what are your ultimate goals in fulfilling those missions? So a notion of loss that's central to grief itself has this double aspect. It alludes to the value of the person who has died, left or died, but it also alludes as well to that person's relation to the perspective of the mourner. So for Nussbaum, then the emotion, right, it's your emotion, it's my emotion. And so it's going to come from your perspective or from my perspective. And so you're not going to be able to detach that perspectivalness from the feeler. Another important thing for Nussbaum is this flourishing aspect, and it's called it's eudaimonistic. Eudaimonia comes from Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, and there's other ethical works. And eudaimonia has this idea of flourishing as a human being. It's been translated as happiness, but for Aristotle, happiness isn't a mental state like joy or contentment. Happiness for Aristotle, your eudaimonia, has the flourishing as a human being, as a human. And so you can kind of think about it as being excellent at being human, or if you're a cat, then being excellent at being a cat. If you're a can opener, being excellent at being a can opener, right? So you're excellent at whatever it is that you are, and that would make you you would have eudaimonia for Aristotle. Nussbaum sees this as key to her view of emotions. So for her, then you have this concept of yourself as flourishing, right? You're going to see things as important to your own flourishing that are really outside of your control, and so you're vulnerable in these things, so other people and things. And a lot of times you're going to see like attachments, like love, things like that, are going to be vital to your own idea of how you're going to flourish in the world. And when you're attaching this sort of um, value to other people, uh, you're really not attaching um, instrumental value. You're attaching intrinsic value. So an intrinsic value is something that it's good because of what it is, not because of what it can do for you. So like pleasure, for example, you want it because of what it is, not because of what it can do. Happiness, joy, consciousness, autonomy, life, these are all things that you want because of what they are, not because of what they can do. And so Nussbaum's view is that the person is seen as an object that's intrinsically valuable and is an important part of your own scheme of ends. So if something is intrinsically valuable, it's valuable because of what it is, not because of what it can do. But in addition to being valuable because of what it is, it's also valuable because it fits into your own scheme of ends and goals. Negative emotions then really feel like this tearing apart of yourself because they have to do with me and my own plans and goals. It's important to my own conception of how I want to live. And it's actually, I would add to that, it's also important about your own self-concept. So if you have this concept of your idea of who you are or yourself, you can think about, let me stop there for a second. There's different uh, theories about how the self works, and I really can't go into them right now, but there's what I would call metaphysical self, and is your self that persists through time and perhaps can be the same. And then you would have maybe like a self concept or something like that. And that's really your psychological self, or at least how it is that different things can affect your life and the way you flourish. Now, when you have this view of yourself, fundamentally, you have these emotions or these connections to other people and other things that are developing part of your concept of yourself, because your concept of yourself is related to, attached to others, and sees them as important for you and as a key aspect to how you're going to live out your life and flourish as a human. And so if someone is removed from your life that you see as important there, that literally is going to feel like a tearing apart, because it's ripping apart part of your own self-concept, your attachment to that person. And that's going to leave you feeling as if you're missing something, as if it's difficult to figure out how to go on. Not that you would have necessarily have thoughts of not going on, but you'd be scared of what to do next. Who am I supposed to call when I'm sad? These types of things. And this has to do with the self-concept, the concept of flourishing as a human. Emotions then look at the world from the subject's own point of view or value. And so it's very important to really get your mind around this, that emotions are something that you have from your own point of view, and they're a judgment that you make about things and people with regard to how they are affecting your own flourishing, because they're from your point of view. She goes into Stoic judgments as an assent to an appearance, and she says, at first, the way this works is it would occur to me or strikes me that some way is okay. So it looks to me in a particular way. I see it that way. but maybe I haven't accepted yet. At that point, you can either accept or embrace the way things are, take it into me as the way things are, thus forming a judgment, or you can disagree, repudiate the appearance as not being the way things are, judge the contradictory, or you can accept the appearance without committing one way or another. Whenever they accept the way the world seems as the way it is, and then it can be said that you've made a judgment in a Nussbaum sense. So if you accept the way things are, the way you see them in that particular case as the way things are, then that's making a judgment. So she's like, I can't assent to the idea that someone I love is forever lost to me and not have strong emotions. This assent involves all the valuative elements, both the proposition I love P, I love that person, and P is forever lost to me. And so that's why I'm saying, look, this assent, this judgment that you're making, this is assent. You can't have these kind of judgments, these kind of assents, without having the emotion. They're essential to it. I love P and P is forever lost to me, so is going to equate to grief. And so that's what her claim is going to be. She says it's possible to say, yes, I see that a person I love deeply is dead and I'll never see her again, but I am fine. I am not disturbed at all. She says it's not possible. She's going to say it's not possible to say that. Um, Nussbaum does give a few ways this could be said, but the most interesting is the third way. Um, the knowledge of the relative significance of the death has not sunk in yet. And so I think this is really key to her. So she gave this example of when her mother dies, right? And she understands that her mom died, right? But then at time T1, but then at time T2, it's like all of a sudden it sunk in, like it really dawned on her the gravity of this, right? Um, it it connected to she sees how this is impacting her life, right? She sees um, her imagination is working now. Is she's able to contextualize it. She's able to make a full judgment about it and really see the influence. And she has a nice quote here. She says, John sort of knowing his mother is dead and sort of doesn't, right? He is not really assenting to the proposition of having to do uh, with her essential importance in his life. Although she really was important to his life, he may be saying these words, but there is something in him that is assenting to the proposition Mrs. Y is dead, his mother's proper name. Or even if we suppose that my mother could possibly lack Oedipistic evaluation, that is a connection to your own flourishing, to the proposition my mother is dead. But what he has not fully acknowledged or taken in is that thought, a person who I deeply love, essential to my life, is dead. To recognize that, she said, is to be deeply disturbed. Um, and so she says, well, it's possible, I suppose, to recognize that that his mom is dead, right? But not really think about it enough to recognize that someone I deeply love is permanently removed from my life. And once you have that judgment, she claims, then you have the emotion. The Neo-Stoic claim is that an emotion is identical with an acceptance of the proposition that is valuative and eudaimonistic. It's concerned with one or more of the person's goals and ends, and so and it's perspectival, so it has to do with your perspective. It's very important to my life, very important to my flourishing. Emotions have a connection to items that are important to our well-being, but she claims that are not fully under our control. So these judgments are necessary and sufficient parts of emotions. So if I have an so she's going to claim it's impossible to have an emotion um, and lack is evaluative judgment. And she says if you have an evaluative judgment that's based related to your own flourishing, then you have an emotion, right? So that it's necessary and sufficient. Um, so there's a question of, well, can thoughts be emotions? This doesn't seem too austere. I mean, actually, I've been in a conversation recently with someone who she doesn't think that thoughts can be emotions. She thinks that it's too intellectualized. That's her claim. But Nussbaum, obviously, she thinks that they are emotions, right? Essentially so. Some may claim that this is too austere, right? It's too plain. Thoughts cannot be emotions. Um, um, and so what else could be there? So the thing is that the bodily experiences cannot be the emotions, like the fluttering in my hand or the trembling in my stomach can't be my grief about my mother's death, right? Because the fluttering in my hands, the trembling in my stomach is not about my mom at all. It might be caused by it, okay, but it's not about it. Just like if I stub my toe, the pain in my toe is not about the curb that I stubbed it on or the door I stubbed it on. It's not about it. It's caused by it, and that's different. The movement seems to lack the aboutness and the capacity for recognition that's an essential part of the emotion, and that's Nussbaum's claim. So internal to grief itself must be the perception that the beloved object and her importance. Um, so the grief itself must estimate the richness of the love between us, and its centrality in my life. Um, it has to. So for Nussbaum, she says that the belief itself has to involve this aboutness and this irrevocable deadness of the mom. Then she considers another case. Perhaps the judgment is the cause of the emotion, and emotion is the bodily movement. Or perhaps the judgment are constituents, are parts, that is, of the emotion along with feeling and movement. So when I grieve, I do not coolly embrace the proposition my wonderful mother is dead and then set about grieving. Um, Rather, the real full recognition of that terrible event is the upheaval, and that's what she's claiming now. So upheavals that are the emotions, upheavals of thought is what she talks about. I think that comes from Proust. And so she says, when I grieve, right, I do not coolly embrace that proposition. My wonderful mother's dead, and then set about grieving, right? When I have that proposition and I'm entertaining that proposition, I have it. That is the emotion. That is the upheaval. That is what grief itself. So that very act of assent is itself a tearing of my self-sufficient condition, knowing that can be violent given the truths that are to be known. So her claim here is you have this system of ends and goals and schemes, the scheme of ends and goals. You have this concept of your own self and the way you flourish, and it's attached to many different people and objects. When one of those things gets removed from you, it's like part of yourself is torn away because the part of yourself that psychologically, cognitively, consciously interacts with the world is part of this psychological concept of yourself. Um, so another objection is that with beliefs, we are trying to fit our mental attitude toward the world. So there's a direction of fit thing, and you'll see this come up when we talk about desires as well. So beliefs are trying to fit our mental attitude toward the world. So like a belief is an attitude about something. It's, a yes to a certain statement. Like, is there yes, there is a computer on my lap, right? That's a belief that I have a computer on my lap. The proposition that I have a computer in my lap, and then the attitude, yes, right? So that's the belief. So beliefs are trying to fit that attitude, that mental attitude, that yes, to the way the world actually is. You want them to be true. But the objection goes, but with emotions, we're trying to make the world fit with our mental attitude. Therefore, emotions aren't beliefs. That's the claim. The thing is that emotions really don't seem to aren't trying to manipulate the way the world is. It's not. Uh, rather they seem to have the same direction of fit as beliefs do. So the emotions are judgments about the world that really seems like they're just value-driven judgments about the way the world is. They really don't try to get the world to fit them, right? It's not like they're so some people think desires are trying to get the world to fit to the way you want things to be, right? So if I want a soda, I would get up and grab a soda, right? So that would be me having the world fit my desire, right? But if I have a belief there's a soda in the fridge, my belief is true only when it fits the world, right? That there is a soda in the fridge. So the claim here is that some people think that emotions are like more like desires, or trying to get the world to fit with the attitude. But Nussbaum's saying that's not the way it is. Rather, I don't try to make the world fit with my fear. Rather, I see something that's dangerous, and so I'm afraid. Right? Emotions are responsive in much the way beliefs are. Emotions are also self-regarding, so this is very important. We've talked about this already. So emotions view the world from a point of view, one's own scheme of goals and projects. These things which one attaches value to, and they attach value insofar as it relates to what it means for me to live well. Um, and so this is a lot of times it's disordered and messy and confused, right? And a lot of times it doesn't line up, your emotions won't line up with your ethical beliefs, and that's okay, because no one's saying that all these things have to line up, right? Just like desires don't always line up, you want something, it doesn't mean that you think you should have that thing, right? So your beliefs and desires can come apart, and your emotions and your other ethical views can come apart. So emotions, though, they always refer to the self, and they see the world from my point of view, right? But the thing is she doesn't want, she wants to contrast her view with egoism, and egoism is kind of, it's pretty much the view that everything that what makes it important, or what makes it right, is that it benefits me in some sort of way, or those types of things. Important thing to keep in mind is that for Nussbaum, you have this a proportionality between the perceived value of the object and the size of the harm or benefit that is given you. So the grief you're going to feel to something that's extraordinarily important to you is going to be a lot greater than if it was only a mild part of your life, a small part of your life. So if your mother is really huge part of your life, then if she's removed, then that's going to cause a lot of tragedy for you. Um, but people will often suffer greatly over trivial losses, right? So this doesn't mean that all the losses that you have are going to be huge. It's just that they might actually be trivial in the great scheme of things, but they might seem huge to you if you're valuing sports a lot or something like that. Your favorite sports team losing doesn't necessarily mean that you're that's going to affect you in some great way, but you might value it so much that you have an intense emotion about it, right? And so a lot of times this disproportionality of emotional responses is a problem, not so much is a problem with overvaluing something that society doesn't seem to be think that's important. Like, it's always funny to me when people get in fist fights about sports, right? That doesn't make any sense to me. But that's because these people really have seen sports as an important part of their life, right? Well, the sports team is a really important part of their life. So you're disrespecting that. You're disrespecting them to a certain extent, and so they're going to react in a very strong way, stronger than a lot of people think is proportional or appropriate, rather. Um, So there are some non-intentional feelings that are frequently associated with a specific emotion. So you have like for anger, it's boiling, right, or trembling with fear. But a lot of times this varies for person to person and sex to sex, right? So like men will often report this boiling feeling with anger, but this is less true with women. And so some people think that your emotions are non-intentional, right? They're not about things, right? They have this feeling about them, this bodily feeling, but that's not essential to emotions like judgments are. So if someone says like I'm angry, but I'm not angry about anything, or I'm afraid, but I'm not afraid of anything, that would be more like a mood than an emotion, right? It doesn't have the object. But you can, and so if I said I'm angry at you, I'm angry, but I'm not angry at anything. You're not actually angry, right? You can't actually have the emotion without it being about something else. But you can have you can be angry about something without having this boiling feeling, and that's true with a lot of people. They'll grant this kind of thing. So we should grant, I think she says, that in typical cases, emotions are conscious experiences. As with beliefs generally, the non-conscious are atypical cases, and parasitic are the conscious cases. So it feels like something to have an emotion. because you're conscious of the thought, right? You're aware of the thought. Much of the time, the feeling might be described as involving something that psychologists called an arousal, and that Proust calls an upheaval, an experience of being shaken up in the ferment. So you're shaken up by this disturbing for some reason. This is an upheaval of thought, and that's why our book's called Upheavals of Thought. Then emotion then is defined by your valuative eudaimonistic thought content alone. Um, um, the experience of the emotion usually contains more than just that content, despite the fact that that's going to be this essence of the content, the evaluative judgment, the eudaimonistic evaluative judgment. It's going to contain a lot of dense perceptions and involve your imaginations. Um, the content, she says that my wonderful mother is dead. The experience itself involves a storm of memories and concrete perceptions that swarm around the content, but add more than is present in it. So emotions typically connect with imagination and picturing of different things, and it's going to have more of a concrete sensation to it than just an abstract thought. And so human emotions then are shaped by the fact that we are all perceiving creatures. They drive this rich texture from those sensory abilities. So when I grieve my mom, I see her, and that side is like a picture, right? It's dense and replete. That density is inseparable from the experience. But these images can vary as well. So there's images. So if you want to say that something is something else, if you want to say, if you want to try to define emotions, you want to find the essence of the emotion. You can't attach attributes that vary from one person to another person, right? So if you want to say that anger is the same between you and me, or that there's some, or if you want to say there's something called anger, you need to find out the essence of anger is that if it loses that essence, that it will no longer be anger. And Nussbaum's claiming is that evaluative eudaimonistic judgment that something important to me has been removed from my life, or that I am in imminent danger, fear, right? So she says these imaginations, these picturings and things like this, these will vary from person to person, and so they're not essential content for the emotion. It's not what the emotion is. So that she's looking like this is what the emotion is. This is evaluative, eudaimonistic judgment, um, and it often comes along with this imaging and this perception and things like that. But those aren't essential to it. Oops, let me go. Okay, here we go. So another thing that's interesting, she talks about background emotions. I'm going to skip over some of the general and concrete things she talks about. You can look at those in your text. But here she says one's beliefs about the importance of. So what is a background emotion? Background emotion is emotions that are typically with you. They're about things like just like beliefs that you have you're not entertaining at the moment. They're like status beliefs or beliefs, not status like in terms of like how you rank in society, but they're beliefs that you just have that go with you. They persist with you. These are background beliefs. So you have background emotions, like one's bodily health, the importance of one's bodily health, the vulnerability of one to disease. Um, Many people have ongoing fears about death. And these are psychological realities. Um, and so these judgments that acknowledge enormous worth, they persist in the fabric of your life. But they don't. Sometimes they're called to awareness by specific events. So then there's the situational emotions, and these emotions occur at specific moments that are calling your attention to them. So for the situational emotion to occur, it usually is necessary that the background judgment be combined with the specific judgment that that situation is eliciting uh, um, that emotion in a particular way. So if I have an emotion about my health, right, that I'm afraid that I'll die one day or something, and then then all of a sudden I fall from a cliff and I'm fearing that I'm going to die, right? So that would be a situational emotion that's elicited from my background emotion of the general fear of death. There is a problem for Nussbaum, I think, in that she brings this up, and that's that if an emotion is a evaluative judgment, then when Nussbaum is not grieving the death of her mother after a number of years of going out grief, then it seems like maybe she doesn't value her, right? So this seems like a problem. You know how grief is. Like if something important to you has been removed from your life, over the course of years, you're going to kind of get over it, right? You aren't going to be in a state of grief for the rest of your life about someone even as important to you as like a lover or your mother or something. Um, so doesn't mean that you no longer are valuing your mom. Even doesn't mean that Nussbaum is not valuing her mother. If she starts to move on, if she's not grieving anymore, and Nussbaum says no. There are a few instances that bring the death to mind. There are going to be fewer instances that bring Martha's or Nussbaum's mother's death to mind. So there can be less situational emotions, right? Also, an interesting thing that happens is that she organizes her mental life to include the death of her mother. And so the structure of Nussbaum's scheme of goal ends and goals is going to incorporate the her mother's death. So she's going to recontextualize her mother's death to fit into her um, concept of flourishing. And so sometimes the judgment changes from the mother who is important in my life now has gone to the person who died was an essential part of my life. So sometimes here where the death is recontextualized into your life, like you're not going to expect to see your Thanksgiving anymore, right? But this one now is that this person was an important part of my life. And so how can I honor her memory? So some things that stay constant, like the judgment about her value, that's going to be the same thing. The badness of her dying, the judgment that she's central in her history is going to be the same. But we may even say that I do not altogether remove her from my life, right? That's true. But has a different place in my life now, Nussbaum says, one that's compatible with her no longer being or with her being dead. And so she's not an ongoing active partner in conversation and support. But the eudaimonistic element of the belief has shifted, and with it, the eudaimonistic aspect of the belief that she has suffered loss. So she recognizes that she did suffer loss in life, but that the mother no longer plays a vital part in her flourishing, and so she's no longer suffering from that lack in her life anymore. She's been able to contextualize that into her life. All right. Well, I have some other videos available for you. So, and if you would like more resources, let me know. But this is a quick version of Martha Nussbaum's theory of emotion.